Hello, this video is a guide on some strategies to identify where you are inside of a bastion by using chunk coordinates and borders. Some are for finding specific locations, such as the hole in the roof of a triple rampart, and some are for orienting yourself, such as finding which direction the ramparts are in Treasure. This video assumes basic knowledge of the 4 bastion types and their ramparts, but no advanced knowledge is needed. Some of these strategies are ones I found on my own, but may have been independently discovered by others. Some are ones I've seen other runners in the community use. If you know of the original discoverer of any of these strategies, please comment it below and I'll give credit in the description. A common strategy for looting a triple rampart is to come up to the roof here, find this empty hole in the roof, and place 2 blocks below so that the piglins can't reach you, and then you can loot this chest and start your route. So obviously, if the top of the triple was buried, it might be difficult to find the hole. For example, if you approach the bastion and saw this, then you can tell this is a triple rampart just by the look of it. But you can also tell that the hole is going to be buried under this terrain, so you aren't exactly sure where it is. Fortunately, there's a consistent way of finding where the hole is using chunk coordinates. So first, go on top of the triple rampart. And once you're on top of the triple rampart, you want to face the direction I'm going to call forwards, which is where there's going to be lower blocks from the bastion, lower and fewer blocks from the bastion. So here we can tell this back side here has a lot of blocks and it's higher up. This front side, you can tell the bastion is kind of under this terrain here, so it's lower and has fewer blocks. So face forwards, open F3, and look at chunk coordinates right here. And you want to go to H8 in chunk coordinates. So 8, is going to be right here. Once you're at 8 and facing forwards, you first check the block to your left. If the hole is there, then great, you can just go down. And that also means you're in stables in either the left or right triple. If the hole is not here, you go 2 blocks forward and check immediately to your left. If there's a hole here, then great, you just go down. And that also means you're in the middle rampart of stables. But if there's no hole here, like in this case, we go 2 more blocks forward and check immediately to our left. And there should be a hole here, and that also means we're in bridge. If you know the bastion type ahead of time, you can save some time by going directly to a spot instead of checking all 3 spots. So in the example we did earlier, you can actually tell this is bridge because this has this tall part here next to the triple. And so once we found 8, then instead of checking all 3 spots here, we could just go directly forward because we know that's what bridge corresponds to, and the hole should be to our left. If you're keeping track, the strategy I mentioned only referred to stables and bridge, but there is a 3rd bastion type that can generate triple ramparts, namely housing. And it turns out that the strategy should never be needed for housing, because when there is terrain covering the top of a triple in housing, such as this, it turns out that housing cuts away the sides. All of this possible terrain, it cuts it away and replaces it with air. So the top of housing, once you see this top of the triple, this whole area will be exposed. So you can just drop right down and you don't need to look for chunk coordinates or anything. Going back to this example from earlier, let's test our strategy. So you can actually see directly that this is a stables and this is actually the right triple of the stables. But let's just assume we don't see this information. Maybe it's covered by terrain, so we can test our strategy. So first is we want to go on top of the triple and we want to find 8. So here's 8. And then we want to get on top of the bastion and then check immediately to our left. And indeed, there's a hole here, which tells you that, well, for one, we can jump down the hole and start our route. But that also tells you that this is stables left or right rampart, which confirms what we saw earlier. Here's another example. For this one, orienting yourself is a little bit more difficult. So first, you can kind of tell from the shape that this is a triple. And you can also tell that this part is more towards the back and this part is more towards the front, because this shape kind of wouldn't be at the back of a triple, it would be more towards the front of a triple. So once you know that this direction is forwards, then you find 8, and So we're facing forwards. To our left here, there is no hole. Let's go forwards 2 and check here. And there is a hole here. So now we can drop down, start our route. But also that tells us we're in stable's middle triple. So here's another example. You can tell that there's a triple here, and this is actually towards the back of the triple. And furthermore, you can actually tell this is bridge because there's this taller part here than the triple, and also this exposed lava. In general, a lot of times, if it's bridge, you will be able to see this part ahead of time, or just because of the shape of bridge, there are usually going to be other ways to see that it is bridge before you start this route, which is helpful because now when we find 8-8, we don't need to check this block and this block, which is what we would do for stables. We just go forward 4 and to the left 1, and when we drop down here, it's going to be the hole. Here's one last example. You can tell we're at the very top of a triple, and this stuff is more towards the back, so the front is going to be this direction. So we find 8-8. And first we want to get on the bastion, and then we can check immediately to our left. And indeed there's a hole here, so now we know we're in stable's left or right rampart, and we can start our route. Sometimes when you enter a stable's triple, the rest of the bastion is buried, and you can't tell which are the left, middle, and right ramparts you're in. And knowing that is quite important for some routes such as triple to gap. And it turns out there is a way to differentiate between some of the ramparts during the route. So usually a lot of the routes come over here, mine here to get the gold. If you open chunk borders with F3G, then as you're mining the gold, if you ever mine through a chunk border, such as just now, then you're on either the left or right ramparts. On the other hand, if when you're mining, you don't mine through any chunk borders, you'll notice if I break these further blocks here, the chunk border is actually further back. But we never mined gold through the chunk borders, then you're actually in the middle rampart of stables. The chunk borders might appear slightly differently depending on the orientation of the bastion. For example, here I'm in a different orientation than the previous bastion, and when I mine here to get the gold, the chunk border is right here instead of in between the gold, but I still mine through it to get to the gold, and that means that we're in a left or right rampart of stables. Similarly over here, when I mine to get this gold, I do expose the chunk border at the very back, but I didn't mine through it, so that means we're in stable's middle triple. So this one has become somewhat of a popular strategy recently. If you're in bridge and you're trying to find the chalice but it's buried, then you can go to this tall part, so this is the tallest part of bridge, and you want to find the pig face side. So under here there's a pig face shape formed by the bastion, and you can tell you're on the pig face side because there's just going to be more and slightly taller blocks here, whereas the back side, the non-pig face side, has a lot of air exposed. So once you find the pig face side, you go to this left part of the pig face, open chunk borders, and you want to go one chunk forward, and then a second chunk forward. And now once you're in the second chunk, you look for chunk coordinates 8-8. So you are 8-8 here. Sorry, that's not 8-8. This is 8-8. And if you dig straight down, then you land on the chalice. If you want to save one block of fall damage, then when you're going in this direction, instead of digging at 8-8, you go to 8-8, and you can go one block to the left instead. And you'll land on this slightly taller part of the chalice. Sometimes you pull up to a treasure bastion, and you can see some of the sides of this big cube, but you can't tell which direction the ramparts are in. There's a way to tell which sides of the cube you're looking at by using chunk borders. If a chunk border cuts 5 or so blocks into a wall, then that wall that you're looking at is either the back wall or the right wall. On the other hand, if the chunk border is basically flush with a wall, So it could be either 0 or 1 blocks off from the wall. Then you could be looking at the left wall or the front wall. If you're looking at the front wall, there's a good chance you can see the ramparts already, just because it's could be exposed. So most of the time, if you're looking at chunk borders that are flush with the wall, it's going to be the left wall. Here's an example. Maybe we approach a treasure bastion from this direction, and we turn on chunk borders, and we see here, this chunk cuts out kind of like a somewhat big square, like a 5x5 or so square from the cube. And when it does that, we know that these two walls have to be the back and right walls. So this is the back wall, this is the right wall, which means that the ramparts are going to be in that direction. Here's another example. We approach a treasure like this. One thing we can rule out is that the ramparts aren't going to be over there. But if we turn on chunk borders, we can see that those chunk borders are almost directly aligned with this wall. They're actually going to be 1 block off. And that tells us we're in the left wall of the cube, so the ramparts should be in this direction. And if you go up here, then you can see that actually the ramparts are here. Here's one last example. You can see the ramparts aren't in this or this direction, so it has to be in either of these two directions. But which way is it? If we turn on chunk borders, we can once again see this kind of square cut out by the chunk border. And once this square is cut out, we know this is the bottom right corner of the cube, which means that the front is going to be in this direction. Here's a quick summary of the strategies I talked about in this video. Finding the hole in the roof of a triple, determining which triple you're in stables, finding the chalice and bridge, and finding what direction you're facing in treasure. I hope these strategies are helpful for your speedruns. Leave any questions or comments below. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe.